My name is Haley, and I was 6 years old when my world shattered into a million pieces that could never be put back together the same way. The funeral was on a Tuesday. I remember because Mom always said Tuesdays were for fresh starts, and the irony wasn't lost on me, even at that tender age. I stood beside the casket in my black dress, the one with tiny white flowers that Mom had bought me just 2 weeks before the accident. My small hand clutched a crumpled tissue that had long since lost its purpose, and I stared at the woman who was supposed to be my mother, but looked like a stranger wearing her face. The viewing room smelled of lilies and whispered condolences. Adults kept touching my head, their voices soft and mournful. "She's in a better place now, sweetheart. Your mommy is watching over you. Be strong for your daddy." But I wasn't thinking about heaven or angels. I was thinking about how Mom would never again braid my hair while humming off key, or how she'd never burn our Saturday morning pancakes because she was too busy dancing around the kitchen in her pajamas. Dad stood beside me, his hand heavy on my shoulder, shaking hands with people whose names I'd forget by tomorrow. His eyes were red-rimmed and hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made him him and left only the shell behind. That's when I first saw her. Vanessa. She approached us near the end of the viewing, when most people had filtered out to gather around casserole dishes and awkward small talk. She was beautiful in that sharp, deliberate way, like a knife wrapped in silk. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the occasion, her makeup flawless, her black dress expensive and form-fitting. "Michael," she said, her voice honey-smooth with just the right amount of grief. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Dad looked up, and for the first time in days, something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, relief, maybe even gratitude. "Vanessa," he breathed. "Thank you for coming. I didn't expect. Of course I came." She placed a manicured hand on his arm, her touch lingering just a moment too long. Sarah meant so much to all of us at the office. That was a lie. Mom had mentioned Vanessa exactly twice in all my 6 years, once to say she was Dad's new colleague, and once to comment that she wore too much perfume to the Christmas party. But Dad didn't seem to remember that. He just nodded, his grief making him grateful for any kindness, real or performed. Then, Vanessa's gaze dropped to me. The look she gave me in that moment would haunt me for years. It was the soft, sympathetic expression adults usually reserved for grieving children. It was something else entirely cold, calculating, almost annoyed. Like I was an obstacle she hadn't accounted for. "And this must be Haley," she said, her voice shifting to that artificially sweet tone adults use when they're trying too hard. "I've heard so much about you." Another lie. But I was 6, and I didn't understand the game being played yet. "Hi," I whispered, suddenly shy. She smiled, but it never reached her eyes. "You look just like your father." Even then, I knew that was wrong. Everyone always said I was my mother's daughter, same dark curls, same green eyes, same stubborn chin. But I didn't correct her. Something about the way she looked at me made the words stick in my throat. 3 months later, she was living in our house. 3 months and 2 days later, she was wearing my mother's ring. The wedding was small, just a handful of people in the courthouse on a gray Thursday morning. I wore the same black dress from Mom's funeral, because Dad said it was appropriate for the occasion. I didn't understand why my father's happiness required the same outfit as my mother's death. But I was 7 now, and 7-year-olds don't get to make those kinds of observations out loud. Vanessa wore cream-colored silk and carried a bouquet of white roses. She looked radiant in the way that people do when they're getting exactly what they want. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, she kissed Dad with the kind of passion that made me look away, uncomfortable in a way I couldn't name. "Now we're a real family," Dad said afterward, scooping me up in a hug that smelled like his cologne and nervous sweat. "Isn't that wonderful, baby girl?" I nodded because that's what you do when you're 7, and the only adult you have left in the world is asking you to be happy about something that makes your stomach hurt. Vanessa watched our interaction with that same calculating look from the funeral, her smile perfectly in place. The changes started small. First, it was my bedtime. Mom had always let me stay up until 8:30 on weekends, and we'd watch old Disney movies together, sharing a bowl of popcorn and critiquing the princess dresses. Vanessa instituted a strict 7:00 p.m. bedtime, every night, no exceptions. "Children need structure," she told Dad when I tried to protest. Sarah was too permissive. "It's not healthy." Dad, still drowning in his own grief, and desperate to believe that Vanessa was the life preserver that would save us all, nodded along. "Vanessa's right, sweetheart. You need your sleep to grow big and strong." Next, it was my toys. Mom had never been one for gender stereotypes. My toy box was an eclectic mix of dolls, action figures, building blocks, and art supplies. Vanessa deemed it chaotic and unfeminine. "A little girl should play with little girl toys," she announced, boxing up my superhero figures and Lego sets. "These aren't appropriate." "But I like them," I protested, watching helplessly as my beloved Batman figurine disappeared into a cardboard box marked donation. "You only think you like them because no one taught you better," Vanessa replied smoothly. "Trust me, darling. I know what's best for little girls." She replaced my inappropriate toys with an army of pink dolls and play kitchen sets. I tried to play with them, I really did, but they felt foreign in my hands, like props in a play I didn't audition for. The worst part was that Dad didn't notice. Or maybe he did notice, and chose not to see, which somehow felt worse. When I tried to tell him about the toys, he was reading financial reports at the kitchen table, while Vanessa cooked dinner, something she did with great fanfare, as if the act of chopping vegetables was a performance worthy of applause. "Daddy, I miss my Batman," I said, tugging on his sleeve. He looked up distractedly. "What's that, honey?" "My Batman toy. Vanessa gave it away, but I want it back." Vanessa's knife stilled against the cutting board for just a moment, but her voice remained cheerful. "Oh, Michael, I meant to tell you about that. I organized Haley's toys today. You wouldn't believe the mess up there. I donated the inappropriate ones to charity. I'm sure some little boy will love them." "That was thoughtful of you," Dad said, already looking back at his papers. "What do you say, Haley? Thank you, Vanessa, for cleaning up your room?" I stared at him, waiting for him to realize what had just happened, waiting for him to ask me if I wanted my toys donated, waiting for him to remember that Batman had been a gift from Mom. But he didn't. "Thank you, Vanessa," I whispered, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. She smiled at me from across the kitchen, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. The smile was triumphant, predatory. She had won this round, and she wanted me to know it. By my 8th birthday, the house had transformed completely. Mom's photos disappeared first, not all at once, that would have been too obvious. Instead, they vanished gradually, like a slow-motion magic trick. The family portrait from our vacation in Colorado was the first to go, replaced by a new wedding photo of Dad and Vanessa. Then the candid shot of Mom and me baking cookies disappeared from the kitchen, supplanted by a generic landscape painting that Vanessa claimed was more sophisticated. When I asked Dad about the missing pictures, he looked confused for a moment, as if trying to remember something that was just out of reach. "Pictures, honey?" "What pictures?" "The one of me and Mommy by the lake. It used to be on your nightstand." A shadow crossed his face. Grief, maybe, or guilt. "Oh, that. Well, sometimes it's better to focus on the future instead of the past, don't you think?" Vanessa thought it might be healthier for all of us to move forward. But I wasn't ready to move forward. I was 8 years old, and my mother had been gone for barely 2 years. I still woke up some mornings expecting to smell her coffee brewing, still turned to tell her about my day at school before remembering she wasn't there to listen. I started hoarding the memories Vanessa couldn't touch. I kept a photo of Mom under my mattress, one of her laughing at something off camera, her hair wild from the wind, her eyes crinkled with joy. I hid Mom's old cookbook behind my other's books, even though I couldn't read most of the recipes yet. I saved the birthday card she'd given me just a month before she died, keeping it pressed between the pages of my favorite storybook. But Vanessa was thorough in her erasure. When I was 9, she redecorated my room while I was at a sleepover. I came home to find my walls painted a soft pink instead of the sunny yellow Mom and I had chosen together. My bedspread, the one with the pattern of moons and stars that Mom said matched my personality, had been replaced with something roughly and feminine that made me feel like I was sleeping in a stranger's room. "Surprise!" Vanessa announced when I stood frozen in my doorway. "I thought you might like a more mature look now that you're getting older." The hidden photo was gone. The cookbook was gone. Even the birthday card had disappeared, as if Vanessa had somehow known exactly where to look. "Where are my things?" I asked, my voice small and defeated. "What things, darling? All your things are right here." Vanessa gestured around the room with its foreign pink walls and unfamiliar decorations. "I just updated a few items that were getting a bit worn. You'll love it once you get used to it." But I didn't love it. I felt like a ghost haunting someone else's life. That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since the funeral, and when Dad came to check on me, drawn by the sound of my muffled sobs, Vanessa was right behind him. "She's just adjusting," she told him in that practiced, understanding voice. "Change is hard for children, but she'll adapt. They always do." Dad kissed my forehead and whispered that everything would be okay. But even his comfort felt different now, filtered through Vanessa's interpretations, softened by her presence. I was losing more than photographs and recipes. I was losing the last connections to the person who had loved me first and best, the person who knew that I preferred my sandwiches cut diagonally and my bedtime stories read with funny voices. I was losing my mother all over again, one memory at a time. By the time I turned 10, I had learned to read the signs. When Dad was home, Vanessa was the picture of maternal devotion. She'd ruffle my hair and ask about my school day with apparent interest. She'd pack elaborate lunches with little notes that said things like, "Have a wonderful day, sweetheart," in her perfect cursive handwriting. She'd even help with my homework, sitting beside me at the kitchen table with the patience of a saint. "Your daughter is so bright, Michael," she'd say, making sure he could hear the pride in her voice. "She got an A on her science project. I am so proud of her. Your daughter. Never our daughter. Never just Haley. Always your daughter, like I was something that belonged to him, that she had graciously agreed to tolerate." But the moment Dad's car pulled out of the driveway, the performance ended. The hair ruffling became sharp corrections of my posture. The interested questions about school became criticisms of my grades, my friends, my behavior. The helpful homework sessions became exercises in everything I was doing wrong. "Sit up straight, Haley. You look like a hunchback. Don't mumble. It's very unattractive in a young lady. Your handwriting is sloppy. No wonder your teachers think you're careless." The worst part wasn't the criticism itself, it was the way she delivered it, with that same honey-sweet voice she used when Dad was around. Like she was doing me a favor by pointing out my flaws. Like she cared so much about my development that she simply couldn't help but correct me. I started spending more time in my room, but even that wasn't safe. Vanessa had a way of appearing in my doorway at unexpected moments, always with some excuse for being there. "I was just checking to see if you had any laundry," she'd say. But her eyes would scan my room like she was looking for evidence of something. "You know, privacy is earned, Haley. Children who can't keep their rooms clean don't deserve closed doors." My room was always clean. Meticulously so. I'd learned that giving her any excuse to criticize me only made things worse. But it was never clean enough. The notebook where I wrote stories about brave princesses who saved themselves was cluttering up your desk. The small wooden box where I kept special rocks and interesting leaves was collecting dust and germs. Even my books, the ones that weren't deemed age-appropriate by Vanessa's mysterious standards, would mysteriously disappear and reappear in different locations, as if she was reminding me that nothing in this house was truly mine. I learned to hide everything that mattered to me. Not just physical objects, but thoughts, feelings, dreams. I became an expert at performing normalcy, at being the grateful stepdaughter who appreciated everything Vanessa did for our family. But inside, I was keeping score. Every cruel comment disguised as concern. Every precious memory erased in the name of moving forward. Every moment when I felt like a stranger in my own home. I was 10 years old, and I was already learning that sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who smile the sweetest when others are watching. I was 12 when I overheard them fighting. It was a Saturday night, and I was supposed to be asleep. But the voices from downstairs were too intense to ignore. I crept to the top of the staircase and pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it 2 floors down. "Can't keep doing this, Vanessa." Dad's voice was strained, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical tiredness. "Doing what, Michael? Taking care of your daughter? Managing this household? Trying to build a life with you?" Vanessa's voice was sharp now, stripped of its usual honeyed coating. "She's miserable. Anyone can see that. She barely talks anymore, barely smiles. She used to be such a happy kid." "She was a spoiled kid," Vanessa interrupted. "Sarah let her run wild, and now you expect me to deal with the consequences. I'm doing my best to give her structure, to teach her how to be a proper young lady, and all I get is attitude and resentment." There was a long pause, and when Dad spoke again, his voice was quieter, more uncertain. "Maybe we should consider counseling, for all of us. This transition has been harder than I expected counseling." Vanessa's laugh was sharp and bitter. "So a stranger can tell us we're doing everything wrong? So Haley can have another audience for her dramatics? Michael, she's manipulating you. She doesn't want me here, and she's doing everything she can to turn you against me. She's just a child, Vanessa. She lost her mother, and I lost my chance at having children of my own when I married you." The words exploded out of her, raw and vicious. "I gave up everything to be a mother to your daughter, and this is what I get? Suspicion and accusations?" The silence that followed was deafening. I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from making any sound, but my mind was reeling. She gave up her chance at having children? But she was only 28 when she married Dad. "She could still Vanessa," Dad said finally, his voice gentle in that way that meant he was trying to fix something he didn't fully understand. "I didn't know you felt that way. I thought you understood what you were signing up for when we got married. I understood that I was marrying the man I loved," she replied. And now she sounded like she was crying. "I understood that we would be a family. I didn't understand that I would always come second to a ghost and a child who hates me." I heard footsteps, the sound of Dad probably moving to comfort her, and I couldn't listen anymore. I crept back to my room, my mind spinning with questions I didn't know how to ask. Did she really think I hated her? Or did she hate me, and this was just another performance? And what did she mean about giving up her chance at having children? Dad would have supported her if she wanted a baby. Unless she didn't want just any baby. Unless she wanted Dad without the baggage of his first family. Without me. 3 days later, I came home from school to find Vanessa in the garage, looking through boxes labeled Sarah's things in Dad's careful handwriting. "Oh, hello, sweetheart," she said when she noticed me. But she didn't stop what she was doing. "I was just organizing some of these old boxes. Your father has been meaning to go through them for years." I watched in horror as she pulled out Mom's jewelry box, the one with the tiny ballerina that spun to Fur Elise. Vanessa opened it, and the familiar melody filled the dusty garage. But instead of the comfort it used to bring, it sounded melancholy and wrong. "Such pretty things," Vanessa murmured, lifting out Mom's pearl necklace. "It's a shame to just let them sit here collecting dust." "Those are Mom's," I said, finding my voice at last. "Were," Vanessa corrected gently. "They were your mother's. But she's not here anymore, is she? and it seems wasteful to just let beautiful things go unused. She fastened the pearl necklace around her throat, admiring herself in the small mirror inside the jewelry box. The pearls had been a gift from my grandmother to my mother on her wedding day. I'd seen the photos, Mom wearing them with her wedding dress, radiant and young and alive. Now they were around the throat of the woman who had systematically erased every trace of her from our home. "They look better on me anyway," Vanessa said, though I hadn't spoken. "Your mother was beautiful, of course, but she never really knew how to accessorize properly. Too understated." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the necklace from her throat and run upstairs to tell Dad what she was doing. But I was 12, and 12-year-olds who cause problems don't get believed when their word goes up against a charming stepmother who was doing her best with a difficult child. So I just stood there and watched as she sorted through the remnants of my mother's life, keeping some pieces and discarding others with the casual efficiency of someone cleaning out a closet. "You know, Haley," she said conversationally as she worked, "it might be easier for everyone if you learn to let go of the past. Your father has. He's moved on, built a new life. It's time you did the same." But I couldn't let go. Not when the past was all I had left of the person who had loved me unconditionally. Not when letting go meant letting Vanessa win completely. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out the truth about my mother's accident. I was 15 when I first went to the library to research my mother's accident. The newspaper archives were kept on microfilm in the basement, in a room that smelled like dust and old paper. The librarian, Mrs. Chen, showed me how to work the machine, threading the film through the reader with practiced efficiency. "School project?" she asked kindly. "Something like that," I replied, which wasn't exactly a lie. The accident had made the local news a 2-paragraph story buried on page 6 of the Metro section, "Local Woman Dies in Single Car Accident." The details were sparse. Sarah Mitchell, 29, lost control of her vehicle on Highway 287 during rainy conditions. Her car left the roadway and struck a tree. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Mechanical failure was suspected, but the investigation was ongoing. I scrolled through the following weeks, looking for updates, but found nothing. The investigation seemed to have quietly disappeared, along with any public interest in the death of a young mother on a rainy Tuesday night. But I did find something else. 3 weeks after Mom's death, there was a small announcement in the society section. Vanessa Hartley promoted to senior account manager at Fletcher & Associates, the same marketing firm where both she and Dad worked. The same position that had been my mother's before. She'd cut back her hours to spend more time with me. I stared at the microfilm screen until my eyes burned. Mom died on March 15th. Vanessa got her job on April 8th. They married on June 20th. The timeline felt obscene in its efficiency. I started paying attention to things I'd missed before. The way Vanessa's eyes would track Dad's movements when she thought no one was looking. The way she touched him possessive, territorial, like she was marking her claim. The way she talked about their destiny and how they were meant to be together. But it was the way she talked about Mom that really made my skin crawl. "Your mother was lovely, of course," she'd say with practiced sympathy whenever the subject came up. But she was never really suited for the corporate world. Too soft, too trusting. She never understood that you have to fight for what you want in this life. Or, Sarah always worried too much about everyone else. She would have been happier as a full-time mother, don't you think? It's such a shame she never got the chance to find her true calling. Each comment was carefully crafted to sound caring while slowly rewriting history. Mom hadn't been soft or naive, she'd been kind and generous. She hadn't been unsuited for corporate life, she'd been promoted twice in 3 years before choosing to prioritize family. She hadn't lacked ambition, she'd simply had different priorities than climbing the corporate ladder. But Dad's memories seemed to be reshaping themselves around Vanessa's narrative. When I tried to correct these revisions, he'd look at me with gentle concern, as if my grief was distorting my recollections. "Sweetheart, you were very young when your mother died. Sometimes our memories of people change over time, especially when we miss them so much. I was losing the war for my mother's legacy, one manipulated memory at a time. I was 17 when I found the insurance papers. I wasn't snooping, exactly. Dad had asked me to look for his tax documents in his home office while he was at work. Vanessa was at her book club, which meant I had the house to myself for the first time in months. The file cabinet was meticulously organized, a holdover from Dad's accounting background. Everything labeled, everything in its place. I found the tax documents easily enough, but as I was closing the drawer, another folder caught my eye. Insurance claims. Sarah. My hands were shaking as I pulled it out. Inside were documents I'd never seen before. Police reports, insurance investigations, correspondence with adjusters, and at the very bottom, a mechanic's report that made my blood run cold. Brake line failure due to external damage. Cuts appear deliberate and precise. Recommend further investigation. Further investigation. But according to the police report, the case had been closed after 2 weeks due to insufficient evidence of foul play. I photographed everything with my phone, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hold the device steady. Then I carefully returned the folder to its exact position and tried to act normal when Dad came home. But normal was impossible when you just discovered that your mother's death might not have been an accident. That night, I lay in bed staring at the photos on my phone, reading and rereading the mechanic's report. Someone had deliberately cut Mom's brake lines. Someone who knew enough about cars to make it look like mechanical failure. Someone who had access to her vehicle. Someone who benefited from her death. I thought about Vanessa's rapid promotion, her quick integration into our family, her systematic erasure of Mom's presence. I thought about the timeline, the efficiency of it all, and I thought about something else. Something had never connected before. Vanessa had worked as a secretary at a car dealership before joining Fletcher & Associates. She had mentioned it once, casually, when explaining why she knew so much about maintaining vehicles properly. She knew about cars, she had opportunity, and she definitely had motive. But knowing and proving are two very different things. I was 22 when Dad got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The diagnosis came on a Thursday, and the oncologist's prognosis was brutally clear. 6 months, maybe 8 if we were lucky. Dad took the news with the same quiet dignity he'd brought to everything else in his life. Vanessa surprisingly fell apart. "We'll fight this," she declared, her voice fierce with determination. "We'll try every treatment, every experimental therapy. Money is no object." For the first time in 16 years, I felt something approaching respect for her. Whatever else she was, she genuinely loved my father. The grief in her eyes when she looked at him was real, raw, devastating. We became unlikely allies in those final months, united by our shared desperation to keep him alive. I moved back home to help with his care, and for brief moments, I could almost forget the years of subtle cruelty and systematic erasure. Almost. But even dying, Dad was still Dad. And one evening, when the pain medication had made him contemplative, he called me into his room alone. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice weak but urgent. "About your mother. About what really happened." My heart stopped. "Dad, I should have told you years ago. I should have been braver." His hand found mine, his grip surprisingly strong. "There's a box in my study, hidden under the floorboard behind my desk. You need to see what's inside." "What kind of box?" But he was already drifting back into medicated sleep, leaving me with more questions than answers. 3 weeks later, he was gone. The funeral was everything Dad would have hated: elaborate, expensive, full of people who barely knew him, but felt obligated to attend. Vanessa played the grieving widow perfectly, accepting condolences with gracious dignity and heartbroken composure. I played my part too, the devoted daughter, grateful for her stepmother's years of sacrifice and care. But inside, I was counting the hours until I could search Dad's study. I waited 3 days after the funeral, long enough for the casserole brigade to stop dropping by, long enough for Vanessa to retreat into her bedroom with her grief and her sleeping pills. The floorboard was loose, just like Dad had said, and underneath, wrapped in an old towel, was a small wooden box that I recognized from his childhood bedroom at Grandma's house. Inside, photographs, documents, and a cassette tape labeled with a date from 1998, 6 months after Mom died. My hands were shaking as I loaded the tape into Dad's old recorder. The sound quality was poor, but his voice was unmistakable, younger and full of anguish. I don't know if I can live with this. The guilt is eating me alive. I know what happened to Sarah. I've known for months. The brake lines were cut deliberately, precisely, and the only person who had access to her car that week was Vanessa. I stopped the tape, my entire world tilting on its axis. She was staying with us while her apartment was being fumigated. She had copies of our keys. She knew Sarah's schedule, knew she drove that road every Tuesday night for her book club. I should have seen it then the way Vanessa looked when she heard about the accident. Not shocked, not surprised, just careful. Like she was watching to see how I'd react. My father's voice cracked, and I could hear him crying. But I was grieving, and I was weak. And when she offered comfort, God help me, I took it. And then she was living with us, helping with Haley, making everything easier. By the time I found the mechanic's report, we were already engaged. I told myself I was wrong, that I was seeing conspiracies where none existed. But deep down, I knew. There was a long pause, the sound of him moving around, maybe pouring a drink. I stayed because I was a coward, because starting over seemed impossible, because I convinced myself that as long as I was watching, she wouldn't hurt Haley too. But I see how she looks at my daughter when she thinks no one's watching. I see the fear in Haley's eyes, the way she's learned to make herself small and invisible. Another pause, longer this time. If something happens to me, if I don't have the courage to face this while I'm alive, then this tape is my confession. Vanessa killed Sarah. I can't prove it in court, but I know it's true. And I failed both my daughters by keeping that secret. The tape ended with a click that sounded like a gunshot in the silence of the study. I sat there for a long time, holding the evidence of my father's cowardice and my stepmother's guilt. Everything I'd suspected for years was true. The manipulations, the cruelty, the systematic erasure of my mother, it had all been the actions of a woman who'd committed murder and gotten away with it. Who'd been living in my house, sleeping in my mother's bed, wearing my mother's jewelry for 16 years, who was upstairs right now, probably planning her next move. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. I sat in my childhood bedroom, still painted that horrible pink from when I was 9, and planned my revenge. Going to the police was tempting, but the tape alone wouldn't be enough. It was hearsay, recorded years after the fact by a man who was now dead. Without corroborating evidence, it would be my word against Vanessa's, and she'd had 16 years to perfect her performance as the devoted stepmother. But I had something better than the police. I had the truth, and I had the patience to use it strategically. The first step was making sure Vanessa couldn't run. Dad's will had left everything to her, but there were legal procedures to follow, documents to sign, assets to transfer. I volunteered to help with the paperwork, playing the dutiful stepdaughter one last time. "You're being so helpful, sweetheart," Vanessa said during one of our meetings with the estate lawyer. "I know this can't be easy for you." "Family takes care of family," I replied, the words bitter on my tongue. The second step was gathering my own evidence. I hired a private investigator, a retired police detective who specialized in cold cases. I gave him copies of everything from Dad's box, plus my own timeline of Vanessa's suspicious behavior over the years. "This is circumstantial," he warned me after reviewing the materials. "Compelling, but not prosecutable after all this time." "I'm not looking to prosecute," I said. "I'm looking to expose. The third step was the hardest, pretending everything was normal while I built my case. Vanessa had decided to sell the house and move to Florida, a fresh start, she said, somewhere without so many painful memories. She'd asked if I wanted any of Dad's things, speaking in that gentle, understanding voice that had once fooled everyone. "You've already taken everything that mattered," I told her, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said carefully. "I've tried so hard to be a good mother to you. You were never my mother." This time, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. Her face twisted with 16 years of suppressed hatred, and when she spoke, her voice was venomous. "You're right. I was never your mother. Sarah was your mother, and she was weak and pathetic and in my way." Those words hit me like stones. The hatred she had always tried to hide was now exposed, and what disturbed me even more was the coldness with which she said them. There was something monstrous in that look of disdain, as though she was finally letting go of the mask of kindness she had always worn. I took a deep breath and spoke firmly, firmer than I felt. "You killed my mother, Vanessa. I have proof. You will pay for this." Her expression froze, like time itself had stopped for a second. She didn't react immediately, but I could see in the subtle shift of her posture and the fleeting doubt in her eyes that she knew she couldn't deny it anymore. "You're crazy," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "This is all a fabrication in your head, Haley. Your father, he forgave me. You're just trying to make me out to be the villain. He understood the struggles. I never meant for this." I smiled coldly, a smile I barely recognized as my own. He knew, Vanessa. He knew everything and stayed silent. But I am not him. I won't let you destroy my life again. That moment wasn't about revenge. I didn't feel anger towards Vanessa. I felt something heavier, sadder. It was like I had finally accepted just how much she had ruined my childhood, my relationship with my father, even my most precious memories of my mother. "I'll expose everything," I said, handing her a copy of the evidence I had gathered. "You will lose everything, and that's enough for me to finally live in peace." It wasn't a triumphant moment. I wasn't victorious. But I was free. The truth had freed me. As I expected, Vanessa didn't resist. The public shame and weight of the evidence against her were too overwhelming. She lost her job, her home, and ultimately, the support of those who once saw her as the charming, successful woman. The lie was shattered, and she was forced to face the consequences of what she had done. I didn't have to do anything more. The truth worked for me. In the end, there was no trial. No dramatic courtroom scene. There was something simpler but equally liberating. The understanding that I was finally free. Free from the weight of the lie. From the suffering of being manipulated by a woman who never deserved the place she took in my life. In the months that followed, I did what I needed to heal. That meant staying far away from Vanessa and anything that she might still represent. I was able to rebuild my life, now free from the pain of those years of suffering. And every year, as promised to myself, I send Vanessa a letter. The same word, the only word that matters. Remember, with each letter, I remember not only the pain she caused, but the power I regained by claiming my truth. It's not revenge. It's the closing of a chapter she tried to steal from me, but one she could never fully erase. I know she will never forget what she did, because the truth is harder to bury than any memory, and that in itself is justice.